J.I.D, or simply J.I.D, is an artist who first began to find relevancy around mid-2017, which if you remember correctly, is right around the time that the SoundCloud scene was really starting to get a lot of momentum. This was really the prime time for the whole colorful hair, face tattoo, drug-addicted rapper blowing up in a big way off of a couple antics on Instagram before then putting out a hit song and blowing up in a big way. And I think a perfect reflection of the time would be to look back at the 2018 XXL Freshman List. I mean, don't get me wrong, we definitely had a couple of these types of rappers in the prior years, like J.I.D and Lil Uzi Vert on the 2016 XXL Freshman List, and XXXTentacion and Playboi Carti on the 2017 one. However, by the time that 2018 rolled around, the entire list basically looked like a crackhead's coloring box. I mean, you got Trippie Redd, Ski Mask the Slump God, Wi-Fi's Funeral, YBN Namir, and of course you got the two poster boys for talentless rap, Smoke Perp and Lil Pump. And in fact, the list was going to be even more crazy than that, initially going to have 6ix9ine, Lil Xan, Lil Skies, Rich the Kid, and many more. But even though the list is mostly comprised of SoundCloud rappers, there is one artist that really stands out, and that is, well, Stefflon Don. I mean, who even was that? Nobody even knew her at the time. But besides her is J.I.D. I mean, immediately at looking at this guy, you can tell that he stands out. I mean, he doesn't have any face tattoos, no colorful hair, he doesn't even seem to be wearing any designer brands, and then once you hear him rap in the cypher, you realize that he's on a completely different level.
Flame it. Lame niggas, I gotta put it in lamest terms. I finna murder you niggas, you better spread the word. I bled words to my head were hurt. The first to say it hurts to say I said it first.
Because J.I.D is an extremely lyrical rapper who blew up in a time when lyrical rap was looked at as nothing more than corny. So how did he do it? Did he just happen to get around the right people at the right time very early on in his career and then eventually get connected to XXL and get on the list, even though at the time nobody really knew who he was? Well, no, because at this point in 2018, J.I.D had already been grinding in the underground for almost 8 years at this point, which I find extremely fascinating. I think we've all heard this story countless times before. A young rapper who happens to get around the right people, eventually signs a record deal, and then blows up in a big way off of one hot record before then fading away. I mean, that's the rapper dream, isn't it? Blowing up in only a couple short years, but it's really artists like this who stick it out, fail over and over and over again, grow their base bit by bit by bit before finally making it years later that I really respect and also find very interesting. And J.I.D is a perfect example of that. So without further ado, let's take a look at the life and career of a man who already felt like a failure before he even started his rap career, and how he eventually made his way up into the mainstream all these years later. Without further ado, I give you the story of J.I.D. Destined Choice Root was born October 31st, 1990 on the east side of Atlanta into a very large family of 7 kids, with both his mother and his father having children from previous relationships. And of course, with that many kids all living together in one apartment, money gets pretty tight, supplies get pretty tight, and well, there's not really a whole lot of space for everybody to have their own stuff. However, that wouldn't really be the experience that J.I.D had growing up, as he was actually the youngest of the family. And not only that, he was the youngest by quite a few years, with his closest sibling being 6 years older than him at the time that he was born. Which meant by the time that J.I.D was a teenager, many of his siblings were already fully grown, finished high school, getting ready to move out and start families of their own, and eventually by the time that he was 14 years old, he was basically the only kid left in the house. So in a way, he got both the experience of living with multiple siblings as well as being an only child in his later years, which had to be kind of a lonely feeling. However, that wasn't the only issue that would plague him in his early life, because of course with the family being so large and only so much money to go around, they would often have to move from apartment to apartment all over Atlanta, meaning that they basically lived in 10 different places before Jib was even 13 years old. Sometimes he was a simple walk away from school, and other times he had to take 3 whole buses simply to make it there. However, things weren't all bad, because being the youngest definitely had its perks. I mean, after all, his parents had already raised 6 whole children at this point, so by the time that J.I.D rolled around, they were a lot more lax than they were with the previous kids. They basically allowed him to do whatever he wanted around the house, with the only rule being that he did have to go to church every Sunday with the rest of the family, but besides that, he was basically left to his own devices. And on top of that, he was often given hand-me-downs from his siblings. In fact, they were hand-me-downs of hand-me-downs, because by the time that they reached him, they had already been through like 3 different people at that point, which seems kind of shitty when it comes to wearing old clothes, but some of the stuff that his siblings gave to him was pretty cool. Because the family actually had a pretty impressive CD collection with a lot of old soul music, as well as classic hip-hop, which I guess at the time in the 90s was just modern day hip-hop. Some of Jid's favorite artists to listen to were Earth, Wind & Fire, Jay-Z, T.I., I and the Notorious B.I.G. With him surprisingly gravitating a lot more to New York hip-hop instead of Atlanta hip-hop, I mean, he definitely respected the legends in the city at the time, but it was something about the wordplay of the New York guys that really drew him in. And he'd become even more fascinated in the genre after he started to watch Smack DVDs with one of his older brothers, which from my understanding is mostly footage of battle rappers going back and forth, spliced in with a couple different interview clips, getting to know their life story and where they came from. Eminem actually had one of these back in the day, and that's the primary one that J.I.D would watch over and over again because he really loved battle rap, he loved the wordplay, he loved the way that they go after each other, and just overall really respected the art of hip-hop. And of course, he also became a very big fan of Eminem. However, at this point in his life, he didn't really have a whole lot of interest in becoming a rapper himself. He would freestyle from time to time, but his main goal in life was trying to make it to the NFL. And this was because a couple of his older brothers had actually played football professionally before, with one of them actually making it to the NFL, although unfortunately he never really was able to get off the bench, but he did make it, and that's more than most can say. So Jid basically spent all of his childhood and teen years practicing to play football, eventually making it onto his high school team, as well as trying to keep his grades up in school so he could actually stay on that team, meaning that he actually was a pretty good student. He didn't skip class, he wasn't stoned out of his mind every day, he actually paid attention to the teacher and even got his work done, and because of that, his future was definitely looking pretty promising. Which most likely made his parents very happy, considering the fact that they were already heavily struggling with his oldest brother, who caught some unknown charge and now was fighting life in prison throughout most of Jid's childhood, and sadly, he didn't end up actually beating that charge and is now locked up even to this day. Okay, maybe sadly isn't the best word to use for him. I mean, after all, we don't know what he did to get himself in prison. He could have killed like 8 people and maybe he deserves to be in there, but either way, it was sad for the family. And with Jid having to attend most of these court hearings, you would think that it would keep him out of trouble, which it mostly did, well, until he got to university. So after high school, Jid actually got the chance to go to Hampton University, which from what I can tell is a pretty prestigious school. He didn't get a football scholarship or anything like that, but he was able to play on the team during the time that he was there, and once again, his grades were pretty good. And he was really hoping that if he kept working hard, he would get drafted into the NFL and finally be able to play football professionally and live out his dream. However, it's not like football was his only interest at the time, because he actually ended up meeting a friend going by the name of Pat, who had his own home studio built into his dorm, and J.I.D would often go over there and record with him. And this is actually where he ended up recording his first ever mixtape sometime in early 2010, going by the name of James Hall the Mixtape, which was named that because it was recorded in James Hall. And after recording and mastering all of the tracks, he ended up burning it onto a CD and handing it out around campus, with him saying that he was the greatest rapper in the entire school at the time, well, until he ended up meeting a couple rappers that were even better than him. Because one day when he was hoping to record some music after football practice, he ended up walking in on 2 other artists recording a verse going by the name of Dr. Dot and Johnny Venus, who formed up the group known as Earth Gang. And immediately after hearing them rap, he knew that he was outdone, which would only spark more competition within him to get better, as well as him forming a friendship with them shortly after that. And he actually managed to get a feature from them on his next project going by the name of Cakewalk, which once again was recorded in the dorm room before them being printed on CDs and handed out around the campus. You gotta keep in mind that this was 2010, so handing out CDs was basically the primary method that young rappers would get their music out to a wider audience. Sharing your music online was starting to gain a little bit of popularity at the time, with websites popping up like SoundClick and Mixtape Monkey and Mixtapes.com, but the only way to really share your music through those websites was to get the link for your project and then email it to everybody you know in hopes that they'd listen to it and like it before then sending it off to everybody that they know, and then possibly you could get a couple plays on the website. And if you're really lucky, you might catch the attention of a music discussion forum who would share your mixtape on their site and hopefully get a couple more eyes on it. But in the pre-streaming era, getting your music out there was pretty tough, considering the fact that there was no algorithm on any of these websites that would recommend the music to new listeners, so the only way that somebody was going to notice your music is if you actually showed it to them or word of mouth, which meant that stuff like radio play, local shows, professional studios, and CDs were a lot more important than they are now. And because of that, a lot of J.I.D's earliest projects are now lost to history, although his fanbase has been trying pretty hard to archive and find a lot of this early music, and they've been doing a pretty good job as well. I was actually able to find a link online to a Dropbox that has the entire James Hall mixtape uploaded on there, but when it comes to Cakewalk and then Cakewalk 2, which came out a little bit later, those seem to be mostly lost at this point, with a couple songs being uploaded online here and there. But luckily for us, we do have the cover arts and the track list at the very least, and by looking at the Cakewalk 2 track list, you can once again see that both members of Earth Gang appeared on the project, meaning that the three rappers were definitely putting in quite a bit of work back in 2010. However, football was still JID's primary concern, with him having high hopes that he'd make it into the NFL and get drafted within the year, although unfortunately that wouldn't happen, and even worse than that, he actually ended up getting kicked off the team for unknown reasons. He's never really spoken on this incident. I don't think it was anything all that serious. It probably comes down to the fact that maybe he wasn't all that good of a player, or maybe his coach didn't really like him, but either way, he ended up getting kicked off the team, and at that point, his entire dream that he had been working on for the past 20 years of his life was completely shattered in a mere moment. And at that point, he no longer really had a reason to care about his studies. He would immediately start skipping class, smoking weed almost every day, hooking up with random women around campus, and getting into quite a bit of trouble. Which honestly isn't all that surprising. All of those kids that you went to high school with who always kept their nose clean and kept out of trouble because they didn't want their parents to be upset with them, once they end up going off to university or college and getting away from their parents, they usually go wild and then they flunk out within like a couple years. And JID definitely fit into that category because after he lost his life's work, he really had nothing left to care about, so he decided to start getting into some real trouble by breaking into somebody's car with a couple other guys and robbing it blind. However, you can definitely tell that the criminal lifestyle was not for him because while he never got caught for this, the people that he did it with actually ended up getting caught on camera, and once they were called into the office of the university, they would immediately tell on him. And while JID was able to avoid any sort of criminal repercussions, he was unfortunately expelled from the university, with him getting the call when he was actively engaging in intercourse with one of his buddies. And when I say buddy, it's a girl, okay? I'm not insinuating anything here. He was hooking up with one of his friends from university, nothing wrong with that, but getting expelled was definitely a pretty big blow for him. I mean, after all, what did he really have going for him at the time? He was actively living in the dorm rooms during the time that he was going to university, meaning that now that he was kicked out, he didn't have a place to stay anymore and he would have to return to his parents' house. He didn't have a job at this point or any sort of work experience, as he had basically focused all of his time on being in school and not picking up a part-time job. But now that he had flunked out of his education, he definitely lost a lot of prospects when it came to getting a better job, and he was basically back at rock bottom. But it seems like JID didn't really care about this. I mean, after all, he only really went to university to try to be a football player. He was studying entrepreneurship in hopes of becoming a lawyer, but after that fell through, he decided that he didn't really care anymore, and instead he was going to pursue a full-on career in hip-hop, which of course his parents didn't really fuck with. I mean, I don't really know a whole lot of parents that would be super happy for their kid to drop out of university to become a full-time rapper, but either way, that's what J.I.D was going to do, and he didn't care what his parents had to say about it. And in fact, he would even take it a step farther by trying to prove to his parents that he was very dedicated to his craft as a rapper. And how did he go about that? Do you think that he locked in and ended up recording a couple mixtapes in a night to show to them, or maybe he started getting booked at shows to try to prove that he could make money off of his craft? Nope, instead he decided that he was going to get a neck tattoo, which back in 2012 was basically the equivalent of getting a face tattoo in 2016. While jobs are definitely more accepting of tattoos nowadays, back then it definitely wasn't the case, and once he ended up returning to his parents' house and showing them the neck tattoo, his dad got so upset that he actually tried to square up with them. Luckily, his mother would de-escalate the situation, but even with him not getting rocked by his own father, he would get kicked out of the house, and after that point, he basically ended up living in a car for the following weeks. This was an old Pontiac that his grandmother helped him buy so he could get back and forth to university, but little did she know that he actually would end up living in this car for a couple weeks, although he wasn't completely on his own. Because luckily for JID, he had a couple friends in the area, or I think a more accurate title would be friends with benefits. Basically, he would go over, he would sleep with these women, and then he got to sleep in a warm bed and get a meal. But trying to sustain this type of lifestyle definitely wasn't easy, as after all, he was starting to run out of money. Once he ran out of money completely, he wouldn't be able to buy gas, meaning that he would have to park his car somewhere permanently, and if it got towed away, he would practically be homeless. So with him starting to run out of options for what he could do, he decided the best course of action would be to reach out to his old friends from Earth Gang and ask them if they wanted to continue to rap with them. And luckily for him, not only did they want to continue to rap with him, but they had also dropped out of university and now had their own place in the hood with some professional music recording equipment that they could use on the daily. They ended up acquiring this equipment from an unnamed NBA player who apparently also wanted to rap on the side, but he realized that wouldn't be too good for his public persona, so he decided to give it up and sell all the equipment to his old friends from university. And this was a massive step up from the homemade recording studio that they used to record in the dorm room, with them having a lot more clear vocals as well as a lot more professional production, and because of that, they were able to really put out some pretty decent music at this point. However, 3 unemployed struggling rappers all living in a house together definitely wasn't going to get the rent paid, so J.I.D had no other option but to pick up a part-time job as a pizza delivery driver at Domino's, which would make ends meet. However, the pay was pretty shit, there wasn't a whole lot of extra money to go around, and on top of that, he was pretty embarrassed to be working as a pizza delivery man and hoped that he wouldn't run into anybody he knew. But in a way, it only made him work harder, because after all, when you're in an uncomfortable situation that you don't want to be in, working a job that you really don't like, it's only going to make you work harder to try to achieve your dreams so you can get out of that situation. And that's exactly what EarthGang and J.I.D would do when they ended up turning their house into an unofficial studio that multiple different talents from all over Atlanta would come to, staying weeks at a time and recording music non-stop all through the night. You got artists from Awful Records coming over like Father, you got OG Mako, the Collective 2-9, then you got Hollywood JB and Black, who actually spent so much time recording music there between the years of 2012 and 2014 that they decided to form a full-on collective with EarthGang and J.I.D, which they ended up naming Spillage Village. And of course, J.I.D was also working on his solo career, dropping his 4th mixtape on June 25th, 2012, once again having a feature from both EarthGang and another rapper that he went to university with, going by the name of Stills. After that, he would drop his 5th mixtape in 2013, going by the name of Power 2, and this is actually the first piece of music that's actively available online from J.I.D, so if you want to listen to his early stuff, this is where you can go. This project also has a feature from Hollywood JB, so this is probably around the time that Spillage Village really started to form into a full-on collective instead of a random name that they would say from time to time. It was also around this time that J.I.D decided to stop rapping about being a gangster, toting guns, and doing crimes because he wasn't really doing any of that, and instead decided to start talking about his actual life, how he kind of came up from nothing, and how he was dead broke. Which was definitely a welcome change, because I think if J.I.D continued to rap about gangster stuff while not actually living that lifestyle, he would have run into problems later on in his career. I mean, we have multiple examples of that. You got people like 6ix9ine, Stitches, the Island Boys, D. Kane, basically anybody who tries to fake that they're in a gang when they're really not, eventually finds themselves in trouble. And it seems like all the work that him and EarthGang were putting in was really starting to pay off, because they would start to get booked at different venues all over Atlanta, with them actually hanging out with a guy going by the name of Sid Brown after performances. Now, I know I shouldn't say this because people are definitely going to get on me about it, but I have no idea who this guy is, but honestly, I don't think that matters all that much. The only thing that really matters is that he had a connection to J. Cole. And J.I.D and Sid eventually ended up building up a good enough connection that J.I.D would actually invite him over to the studio to listen to unreleased music, as well as giving him a couple CDs so he could listen to the music on his own, and apparently Sid liked it enough that he actually wanted to show it to Cole as well. And apparently Cole really liked it. In fact, he liked it enough that he actually went to go meet EarthGang and J.I.D in person at their home studio, hanging out there on a couple different nights and forming a connection with them. However, it wasn't like he wanted to sign them right off the bat. He definitely saw some potential, but it was really only a friendly connection at this point. However, there was another label that was scouting J.I.D out at the time, because at one of his shows he actually got the chance to meet a label head going by the name of Coach K, who runs Quality Control, which is mostly known for signing big acts like the Migos and Lil Yachty. And apparently he liked J.I.D's music so much that he actually wanted to sign him on the spot, but J.I.D surprisingly turned it down. Apparently the reason behind this is that he didn't really feel like his style fit with that more trap heavy auto-tuned Atlanta sound that Yachty and the Migos made, and he felt like he wouldn't be a good fit, which is kind of admirable, but when you're working as a pizza delivery driver and making a little bit of extra money at these shows, you would think that you would take any bag that you could get. But despite that, there wasn't any bad blood between the two of them, and Coach K would continue to support J.I.D in his career for the following years. Once 2014 rolled around, Spillage Village ended up adding a new member going by the name of Jordan Bryan, and they ended up dropping their first collaboration project together named Bears Like This. And it was actually this project that ended up gaining them a lot of attention within Atlanta, with them even getting the opportunity to open up on Ab-Soul's These Days tour, although I think they only opened up for him in Atlanta and they didn't go on the full tour, but it's hard to tell either way. There is footage online from at least one of these shows, which probably is Atlanta. There's also vlog footage of the entire tour where J.I.D and EarthGang don't really seem seemed to be there, so I think it was only Atlanta, but if I got that wrong, feel free to call me out in the comments below. Either way though, opening up for a massive artist is definitely a good thing no matter what, and after that, they basically became local celebrities within Atlanta. And for the rest of the year 2014, Spillage Village and J.I.D would continue to do venues all over the city, making more money, and eventually he was even able to quit his job as a Domino's delivery driver. It was also this year that he was supposed to make a collaboration mixtape with Black, but for one reason or another it never ended up coming out, although he does say that it's completely finished and someday it's probably going to leak online, which is going to be pretty cool to see. Once 2015 rolled around, it seems like J.I.D finally discovered SoundCloud and he ended up dropping a couple songs on there, with one featuring Black and another featuring OG Mako, and they ended up doing pretty good numbers. And it seems like he liked the platform enough that he actually ended up dropping an entire exclusive mixtape on there going by the name of DiCaprio, which had a feature from a guy going by the name of Jace, although it's probably not the Jace that you're thinking of. There's also another artist on this project going by the name of Key, who I had never really heard of before, but after doing my Matt Ox video, I realized that one of his biggest songs actually has a feature from this guy, so from what I can tell, he's a pretty big deal in the world of hip hop. I'm sorry guys, I don't know every single rapper that's ever came out in the game, but you know, I'm learning as we go. At least I'm not talking about Lil Pump this time, right? Well, at least not yet. Anyways though, this project went on to get 300k plays on the platform, which is pretty decent for a mostly underground rapper that really only had a fan base in Atlanta at the time, as well as some people outside of Atlanta starting to catch on because of the algorithm that SoundCloud has. That project was then followed up in 2015 with yet again another Spillage Village collaboration project going by the name of Bears Like This Too. And not long after that project came out, the collective would get a chance to go on tour with two other rappers who were signed to the Dreamville label going by the name of Bass and Omen, which of course would only bring J.I.D and J. Cole one step closer together. And this connection would only continue to grow into 2016 when the collective ended up putting out their third project called Bears Like This Too Much, which actually had a full-on feature from J. Cole on the song called Can't Call It. And this project even had production from both J. Cole and apparently Mac Miller, although I can't find the credits for what songs exactly he produced on, but either way, they were really starting to make some big time connections. And not long after that project came out, Jib would actually get the opportunity to go on a pretty big YouTube channel going by the name of Kinda Neat, which was kind of like On the Radar before On the Radar, although the only difference is instead of freestyling, they perform a song that they already have, with Jib performing his track Never. And it was this very track that would go on to become his real big breakthrough hit. It never ended up charting or anything like that, but it would get him enough attention online that J. Cole finally felt like it was the right time to sign him to a full-on deal with Dreamville. And that's exactly what would happen in February of 2017 when it was announced that both J.I.D and EarthGang had signed a deal with Dreamville, meaning that he was now a label-backed artist. Which had to be a really cool feeling, because after 7 long years of grinding in the underground, he would finally be able to tell his parents that he had really made it as a rapper and it would now be a sustainable career choice. And it seems like his parents were really happy for him, but unfortunately not everybody in the family felt the same way, because one of his older sisters was very religious and she saw the music industry as very demonic and evil, so with him now being part of it, she didn't want to associate with him in any way. Which in most cases I would kind of understand. I mean, the music industry definitely is pretty evil, but the guy signed to Dreamville. I mean, look at this label. They don't exactly look like hardcore gangsters doing drugs and worshiping Satan. In fact, J. Cole is actually pretty religious himself, so it seemed like a perfect fit for Jid to be at. But either way, his sister didn't want to hear it, and unfortunately, it seems like their connection would completely fizzle out, and I'm not sure if they're on speaking terms nowadays. But unfortunately, that's the type of thing that happens when you become rich and famous. You'll see your own fans switch up on you, your own friends, and unfortunately, even your family members. But even with that connection broken off, it wasn't like J.I.D was in a bad spot whatsoever, because from here on out, it was only up, with him immediately dropping a music video the very same day that he announced his signing to Dreamville for his track Never, which ended up racking up an impressive 16 million views on YouTube alone. I'm not really sure how many it had at the time, but with the Dreamville push, it probably got some pretty decent numbers first week as well. And then only 16 short days after that, he ended up dropping his next project and first official studio album going by the name of The Never Story. Now this project had features from both Black as well as EarthGang and was basically the standard fare that you could expect from Jid at this point, which always kind of made me feel weird that they called it a full-on studio album, because it most likely wasn't even recorded in an official studio. It probably was created back at the house alongside EarthGang and the rest of Spillage Village, which is okay, but I feel like it would have made a whole lot more sense to try to advertise this as a mixtape instead of an album, because when you call it an album, it has a whole lot higher standards than it probably should. good. But either way, the project did end up doing pretty well, with it even managing to scrape its way onto the Billboard Hot 100 bubbling under charts at 197, which for somebody who was mostly underground at this point was pretty good. After that, the very next month in April, he would appear on Hot 97 to drop a freestyle for Funk Flex, which unfortunately didn't go as well as he wanted it to. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's not like he ended up pulling a smoke perp and doing a terrible freestyle and getting made fun of by everybody on the internet, but he didn't really get the reaction that he wanted from Funk Flex, and after that, he decided to swear off of freestyles and never do them again.
I slammed my penis in the car door,
which he would eventually go back on in 2020, but for the following 3 years, we never really got a freestyle from J.I.D. Well, except for when he got on the XXL Freshman List, but let's pretend like that didn't happen. After that, he would then appear on Angela Martinez, doing yet another interview with her, before then spending the rest of 2017 dropping music videos for tracks off of his mixtape, with the most notable of these being an animated music video for his track Ed, Ed, and Eddie, which ended up coming out in early 2018. On top of that, he also got the chance to open up for Tory Lanez, the fucking GOAT, as well as going on a couple legs of J. Cole's For Your Eyes Only tour, which was definitely a pretty big opportunity for him. With him and Earth Gang then going on to headline their own tour, which basically led them through the rest of 2017. So at this point, things were definitely going pretty good. He was definitely an upcoming rapper, he had some pretty big songs, his mixtape was doing well, but he hadn't really broken through to that mainstream level yet. But all of that would change in 2018 when he ended up getting on the cover of the 2018 XXL Freshman List, which once again was kind of out of nowhere. A lot of people didn't really know about J.I.D at the time. I mean, he definitely had his fan base, and when it came to J. Cole and Dreamville, all of those fans definitely knew about him, but when it came to the mainstream rap game, he was a little bit unknown, which led Adam22 to actually tweet out that he didn't know who J.I.D was and didn't know why he was on the list, which definitely made his fans pretty upset, going after Adam to the point that he actually took the tweet down. But before we really talk about this freshman list and the effect that it had on J.I.D's career, I want to talk a little bit about the culture of 2018 and what was really going on around the time, because at this point, SoundCloud rap had basically hit its peak. We had already started to see a lot of these rappers break through in 2016, like Lil Uzi, Famous Dex, Lil Yachty, before we got more and more in 2017, before finally in 2018, basically everybody was a SoundCloud rapper. However, not everybody was so happy with this trend, with a lot of classic hip-hop fans seeing it as very watered down, dumb, and just overall very disrespectful to the medium of hip-hop as a whole. The unfortunate part of that is that they were basically painting the entire scene with one brush, looking at people like Lil Pump and Smoke Perp, saying those guys make really dumb music and act stupid online, so that's basically what this whole trend is, while also overlooking artists like Ski Mask the Slump God, Lil Uzi Vert, and XXXTentacion, who are actually genuinely talented and just so happen to have a crazy hairstyle as well as face tattoos. And for about 3 years' time, the entire rap game and all the classic media was basically pushing back against this trend, not really wanting to give them respect, not giving them interviews or airtime, and basically the only medium that was pushing them was No Jumper. And this would lead the new generation of fans to get sick of the old heads shitting on their music day after day after day, so they finally decided to retaliate by tweeting stuff out like fuck Eminem, fuck J. Cole, fuck Kendrick Lamar, and so on, which was most likely a joke, but either way, Lil Pump and Smoke Perp ended up seeing these tweets and running with them going to several shows and basically chanting fuck J. Cole, fuck Kendrick, fuck Eminem, but mostly they were focused on J. Cole. And this even led Lil Pump to put out a full-on diss track on J. Cole called Fuck J. Cole, which is basically exactly what you would expect it to be.
Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole.
It never ended up officially releasing, but I really don't think anybody was dying to hear the full version of this song, but apparently J. Cole actually noticed this, and he ended up retaliating in his own song called 1985, where he would talk about the whole new generation of music and how they were riding trends, and before long it was all going to run out and their careers were going to be over, which once again was true for people like Smoke Perp and Lil Pump, although it wasn't true for the entire scene. But like I said, J. Cole was an old head. He was basically painting the entire scene with one brush. He wasn't really looking any deeper than that. And for the next couple months, Lil Pump would basically ride off the back of this supposed beef with J. Cole to try to keep his name relevant for a couple more months. However, it wasn't actually Lil Pump who ended up responding to this diss track. It was actually another artist from the new generation going by the name of YBN Cordae, who ended up putting out a pseudo diss track slash response to the 1985, basically saying that old heads have been hating on the new generation for years at this point, and back when J. Cole was young, he probably had old heads hating on him as well. And it seems like this actually got through to Cole because he decided to really take a look at this scene and try to go to ground zero to see why it was so popular, with him actually making a trip to the No Jumper store. Which probably wasn't the best day for him to head down there because he ended up running into Icy Narco, who was basically a clone of Lil Pump and a complete industry plant, and then he asked Adam 22 what made Icy Narco so special, and trying to answer that question is probably pretty tough. After that, Adam and Cole ended up talking about religion, which definitely had to be kind of a weird conversation considering the fact that Adam doesn't believe in anything and J. Cole is very religious. But either way, they ended up talking to each other, and not long after that, Adam would also connect J. Cole to Lil Pump for the two of them to do a face-to-face interview and talk about their supposed beef, where basically J. Cole would show a whole nother side to Lil Pump, which in a way kind of put an end to the whole mumble rap versus old head war, although you still had people like Eminem and all his corny clones dissing the mumble rap wave online, but to be honest, nobody really took them all that serious. Well, not Eminem, but the other guys. That's actually how Tom McDonald got his start, so blessed be to J. Cole for giving this guy a platform to start spitting his shit. Good for you, I guess. But anyways, all of that was to say that it was kind of strange to see J. Cole's very own artist appear on the XXL Freshman List alongside all of these mumble rappers that he had been warring against for the first part of the year. However, I think it was actually this list that would show J. Cole that there actually was quite a bit of value within the SoundCloud wave, with Ski Mask the Slump God and J.I.D doing a pretty impressive freestyle, which was probably the standout for that year's class. Overall, the class isn't very good, but that's another video for another day. And he even ended up putting both Ski Mask the Slump God and even Smoke Perp, who was one of the main guys who was dissing him at the time, on the next Dreamville album in 2019, so it seems like he had a complete change of heart. And that was further proven when J.I.D actually ended up going on No Jumper and doing a full interview on there, which once again surprised his fans because at that point they saw No Jumper as nothing more than a place for people to do drugs and make terrible music, which is possibly more accurate nowadays, but at the time it was a legitimate hip-hop resource. I'm just kidding, No Jumper is pretty cool. Soon after that, in July 2018, J.I.D would then appear on Denzel Curry's Taboo album on the track Sirens, which was a pretty cool connection, as after all, Denzel Curry is basically the GOAT of the SoundCloud era, or at least one of them, and it seems like J.I.D was really starting to accept them at this point. Soon after that, he would do a kind of ghost feature on Mac Miller's track called Self Care, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. I had no idea that it was J.I.D doing the ad-libs at the start of the track, but that's super cool to know now. After that, he ended up doing this really weird ASMR interview where he talked about his next upcoming album going by the name of DiCaprio 2, before then announcing that he was actually going to go on tour with both Mac Miller and Thundercat. Damn, no way, he's really going to get a chance to go on tour with the absolute GOAT Mac Miller, as well as that random guy from TikTok, Thundercat. I mean, how did that guy even get on this tour? Didn't he not blow up until like 2020? But either way, random out of place TikTok artists who definitely don't have a history in hip-hop whatsoever and haven't been making music for years and definitely never produced for Kendrick Lamar aside, the tour seemed like it was going to be pretty good. But unfortunately, right before they got the chance to head out, Mac Miller would sadly pass away from an overdose in September 2018, meaning that the tour was no longer going to happen, and instead, J.I.D would have to focus his attention back on his second album. But even with him missing the opportunity to go on this massive tour, his momentum wouldn't slow down at all, with him dropping the lead single for DiCaprio 2, going by the name of 151 Rum, which became his biggest song at the time, as well as getting 19 million views on YouTube audio alone. After that, in October, he would then go on to do a live performance of his unreleased track called Working Out, which went on to get 33 million views on just the live performance alone, meaning the hype for this project was out of control. After that, he would then go on to drop the third single off the project called Off D's featuring J. Cole, and in my opinion, this is definitely J.I.D's best song to date, or at least my favorite. There probably are some more lyrically conscious ones, but for catchy value, it's the catchiest.
Got the bungees, I'ma jump with this shit, but I better get whipped with a pistol grip. Nigga talking that shit, I'm talking my shit.
And you can definitely tell that it caught on with the mainstream, because I remember actually hearing this on the radio back in 2018, as well as it being the first song from him to go gold alongside Never, which went gold the very same year in 2020. So at this point, it was an absolute no-brainer for him to drop the full project, which he ended up doing only 20 days later on November 26th of 2018. And once it finally came out, Was it good? Did it sell well? Well, yes and not really. So first off, the project had some pretty decent features like the aforementioned J. Cole as well as ASAP Ferg and Joey Badass, and it seems like fans really enjoyed the project, but when it came to the sales department, it only sold 16K, which for a first outing isn't that great. The sad reality is that when Tonal Xanarchy came out, it actually ended up selling 20K first week, and this project sold less than that, which doesn't mean that the quality of music is worse, but at the same time, I think a lot of people expected that J.I.D was going to do a lot better in his first week. However, I think that mostly comes down to the fact that at the time, lyrical rap really wasn't all that popular, and he was really only working off of a niche fan base, which was growing by the day, but at the same time, it was going to take a little bit before the mainstream would really accept him. However, despite that, the album would go on to debut on the Billboard Hot 100 at number 41, which is definitely a lot better than 197, don't get me wrong, and he would also put out a music video for Off D's on the Lyrical Lemonade channel, which went on to get 35 million views. Before he finally finished off the year by going on Jimmy Fallon Live to perform his song Strawberries, basically closing off the most successful year of his entire career. Or at least that's what it would have been if he was yet another SoundCloud rapper. Because before we move on, let's take one more look at this 2018 XXL Freshman List and see where everybody ended up. So Lil Pump, who was probably the most popular rapper at the time, is now a mega grifter who can't even pull 100K views on a music video. Smoke Perp has basically gone completely ghost after being clowned by the entire internet. Wi-Fi's Funeral was never really a big rapper, but he definitely fell off after he started to get into hard drugs as well as scamming several openers on his tours, which definitely isn't a good look, although he is sober now, so I mean, maybe give him a chance, maybe he'll have a comeback. Stefflon Don, nobody even knew who that was at the time. Then you got Blockboy JB, who you probably haven't even thought of once in the last 7 years, or maybe you don't even know who that is. You got YB and Namir, who honestly deserves his own video considering how embarrassing his fall off was. I mean, I don't think anybody else in the music industry has ever gotten it as bad as YB and Namir. And then you got Trippie Redd and Ski Mask the Slump God, who are probably in the best positions right now. Although, to be fair with you, I know it's a little bit unpopular, but I feel like Ski Mask is only really holding on due to the friendship that he has with Juice WRLD as well as XXXTentacion. I'm not saying that he couldn't have had a super great career, but he basically took a massive hiatus for almost 5 years and let all the hype around him die down, and while he's definitely still fondly remembered and a lot of people still listen to his music, I don't think he's ever going to be on that mainstream level again. And then you got Trippie Redd, who honestly is doing pretty well nowadays. There's not too much to say about that, so that only really leaves J.I.D. Somebody who was looked at as an outsider at the time when he was placed on that list, with many people thinking that he didn't belong, it wasn't his time, and his fan base wasn't big enough to really push him through, but nowadays he's probably the biggest rapper that appeared on that list, because 2019 would actually become an even bigger year for him than even 2018, because he would immediately start the year off by going on 2 whole tours, one across America and then doing another one in Europe, which definitely was a good idea because it meant that he could build his international fan base as well as the fan base that he had at home. One of the stops off of this tour was at South by Southwest, where he actually ended up dropping in with Nardwuar and doing an interview with him, which is definitely one of the most entertaining Nardwuar interviews I've ever seen, so shout out to both of them for that one. After that, he would appear at Rolling Loud for the second time, with him previously going there in 2018 and now returning in 2019. Soon after that, the Dreamville label would then release a compilation album called Revenge of the Dreamers 3, which had a song on it called Costa Rica, featuring way too many rappers to list, but it had J.I.D, Ski Mask the Slump God, and surprisingly Smoke Perp, as well as that song going on to become platinum. But then surprisingly, right after that, J.I.D would kind of go quiet for about a year's time, disappearing right after the summer of 2019 and not really reappearing until late 2020. And for most rappers, that would be a death sentence for their career. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of artists out there that would be able to survive a hiatus like that, especially when they're so new to the game and had only really just got their start. But it seems like J.I.D had played all of his cards the right way. He had built his fan base up in a way that they would be willing to wait for music, and with the type of music that he makes being a little bit more deep than your average radio play, a lot of fans were willing to wait and wait and wait and wait until about mid-2020 when J.I.D would once again pop up again on Spillage Village's 4th album called Spillage. Although it does seem like this would be the final time that he would appear on any Spillage Village projects. I tried to look through all of the projects they put out after 2020, but he doesn't seem to have any features unless maybe he's uncredited. I'm sorry I didn't look through every single body of work that he ever put out to do this video. Their type of music is definitely not my type of music. I like J.I.D, but I'm not as big of a fan of Earth Gang. but either way, it seems like he stepped away from the collective at that point. After that, in late 2020, he would drop a couple random freestyles on his channel, showing that he was no longer afraid of funk flex and he wasn't traumatized anymore, and that led him into 2021. After that, he would begin to tease his third album, which was meant to be called The Forever Story, although he wouldn't really put anything concrete out at the time, keeping fans waiting longer and longer. After that, he ended up collaborating with Denzel Curry again on a track called Bra Remix, before then once again going silent. However, even with the wait for the album seemingly taking forever, 2021 would actually become J.I.D's biggest year ever because he ended up getting two extremely mainstream features, with him appearing on Doja Cat's album Planet Her on the track Options, which is kind of a strange collaboration, but either way it seemed to fit. And then after that, he ended up putting out an even weirder collaboration that would become even bigger when he ended up collaborating with the band Imagine Dragons on the track Enemy. And not only was this a massive feature with a big mainstream band, but it was also part of the soundtrack of a Netflix show called Arcane, which is a League of Legends spin-off that was very popular in China and at one point was the most popular show on Netflix, even beating out Squid Game, so that only made the song even bigger. With it quickly rising the charts that year and peaking at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, as well as going 4 times platinum, which is definitely J.I.D's biggest song to date. And on top of that, he also got the chance to perform the track live at the Grammys as well as the Game Awards, which was kind of weird to see because I remember kind of forgetting about J.I.D between 2019 and 2021, only for him to randomly pop up when I was watching the Game Awards, so cool connection there. And of course, having a massive feature like that would only help to push his Spotify monthly listeners up and up and up, with him having over 20 million at the time that I wrote the script, although I checked right now as I'm recording this and it seems like they've dropped slightly, but he's still around 20 million. So yeah, at this point, J.I.D had made it. There's no argument anymore. I mean, he definitely seemed like he was revved up to become one of the biggest mainstream rappers in the game in 2021, going on to appear on more pop albums, but at the same time, would that really work for him? I mean, his fans had kind of built him up as a more lyrical, conscious rapper, and that's the type of music they were going to want to see from him. They weren't really going to want to see him do a bunch of pop features, but at the same time, I do think they were happy to see him grow bigger, but they also still really wanted that album. Oh yeah, one more thing before we get to the rollout of The Forever Story, he actually ended up getting one of his songs on the soundtrack for Madden 2022, which is pretty cool. I mean, he never made it to the NFL, but in one way, he kind of did. And honestly, that's nice to see. I mean, he probably felt like his life was over after he got kicked off the football team, but now in a weird way, he had kind of made it. So shout out to Jib for that one. But anyways, let's finally get to the rollout of his third album. With him immediately kicking off 2022 with the lead single off of the project going by the name of Surround Sound, featuring 21 Savage and Baby Tate, which went on to gain an impressive 100 million views on YouTube alone. So needless to say that fans were more than ready. They loved the song, they listened to it over and over again, and they were finally ready to get that full body of work. But once again, J.I.D went on another hiatus. It's believed the reason behind this is because the label wanted to focus on the next compilation project to come out from them called D-Day, so instead of focusing on J.I.D's solo project, they ended up putting that out instead. After that project came out in March, he ended up doing another freestyle on his channel called 29, which went on to gain 2 million views, which is definitely less than the first track, but considering this didn't appear on the album at all, it was basically a throwaway. He would then put out a music video for the track Stick, featuring Kenny Mason, Sheck West, and J. Cole, which of course appeared on that D-Day project. After that, he would celebrate all the gold and platinum plaques that he was receiving throughout 2022, with him also giving a shout out to Mac Miller because Self-Care went platinum that very same year, before finally dropping the second single off of the project called Dance Now, featuring Kenny Mason, which went on to run up an impressive 23 million views on the YouTube video, which of course is still under the first single, but either way, the fans were still there, they were still hyped up, they were ready for the project. But right before he finally put this project out, he decided to do one more feature on a track with somebody going by the name of Dot the Genius, alongside Denzel Curry and Kid Cudi on a song called Talk About Me, which got a Lyrical Lemonade video. But once all the hype had died down from that track, he decided it was finally time to put out his third album, The Forever Story, which dropped in summer of 2022 after 3 long years. And honestly, for the fans, it was definitely worth the wait, with many immediately eating it up, calling it one of the best projects of the entire year, and even saying that it was Grammy worthy, although unfortunately he wasn't nominated. And on top of that, there was also big name features from Lil Wayne as well as Lil Durk, so everything was sizing up for this project to be very, very successful. And was it? Well, yes and no. Like I said, once again, his fans were fed, they were happy, they enjoyed the project, but unfortunately in the sales department, once again, it kind of underperformed. With it only selling 30K first week, in fact a little bit less than 30K, as well as appearing on the Billboard Hot 100 at 12, which is definitely a lot better than DiCaprio 2, but at this point I think fans were expecting that he was going to get a #1 album. And I think that all goes to show that at this point in 2022, he was really starting to outgrow Dreamville. I mean, after all, the label definitely helped him out. They put him where he was. They got him all the fame, the fortune, and everything he could have wished for. But that's also discounting the fact that J.I.D is just genuinely very talented. I mean, even if he never got signed to Dreamville, he probably would have made it in one way or another. But unfortunately, when you're signed on to an artist-run label, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, when they think of J. Cole, they probably think of J.I.D, but at the same time, you're also kind of in Cole's shadow. And it's not like J. Cole really did anything to try to put him in that shadow. He basically set up J.I.D for success and then let him run off with it, but it seems like Dreamville as a whole was starting to shift around that time, with middle management starting to take more control and J. Cole starting to move farther and farther off from the label. And this can be shown by the fact that once again we are now waiting years and years for a follow-up project to the Forever story, with him teasing it over and over again, even saying that there's going to be big name features on it like Jay-Z, the Flatbush Zombies, and even Russ. But we're basically stuck in that limbo where we haven't really got a whole lot of information on it. It could drop this year, maybe the next, and it seems like he is having label troubles. 2023 was once again a pretty slow year for J.I.D, with him really only putting out one project during the year, which was a small EP called Black Boys, which had 2 features from Lil Yachty. One of those tracks had already leaked before and was called Van Gogh, but he ended up re-releasing it, as well as putting out another track going by the name of Half Doing Dope, which also featured Babytron. So fans liked those songs, but once again, they were still waiting for another full project. But after that, he basically went completely silent again, until reappearing on January 1st of 2024 to go on Jimmy Fallon and do another live performance, which was fine, I guess. I don't know, I just find it really weird the way that they're trying to position J.I.D. Like, is he supposed to be a more spiritual, thoughtful rapper that's not really in the mainstream, or are you trying to push him as a mainstream rapper? Because you kind of gotta pick one or the other. Soon after that, he would then appear on the Lyrical Lemonade album, with him hopping on a track alongside Sheck West and Ski Master Slump God called Fly Away, which also got a video on the channel, of course. He also got a small cameo in another music video off of the album for Eminem's track Doomsday 2, which apparently formed a connection between them, because he would then go on to feature on Eminem's next project, The Death of Slim Shady, on the track Fuel, which definitely had to be a pretty cool connection for him, considering the fact that he looked up to Eminem as a kid. Although it is kind of funny to see Eminem's fans talk about how he's finally accepting the new generation and taking these younger kids and putting them on his projects, when J.I.D is like 35 years old at this point, so he's definitely not a kid anymore, but hey, baby steps, baby steps. And then pretty soon after that, the entire Drake and Kendrick rap battle would break out, with of course J. Cole getting put in the middle of it, with apparently a bunch of people at Dreamville trying to encourage him to fight back against Kendrick, which definitely wasn't a good look, because J. Cole would do that, but then he would back out, which made the entire label as a whole look pretty bad. I mean, I really don't think it's the end of the world that a lot of Kendrick fans are saying that it is, but at the same time, it doesn't look good when you have your full chest out ready to fight and then you back away. J.I.D would make it very clear that he didn't want to get in the middle of this, but at the same time, when you're mostly known for being on the label with J. Cole, you're kind of going to get drug into it. And after the dust settled, it kind of put J. Cole's career in a weird place. I mean, he's definitely still respected as a GOAT in 2025, but I'm not sure if people would still consider him as one of the big 3 nowadays. On top of that, there's other people in the label complaining that they're not able to put music out the way that they want, saying that J. Cole's not helping them out. Not really sure what's going on there. J.I.D has spoken on it briefly from time to time, but he's not really coming out and saying fuck Dreamville. All he really said is that he's not really hanging out with all the people from Dreamville anymore, which kind of makes sense. I mean, he's almost 35 years old, and you're not always going to be hanging with the same people at 30 that you were at 20. However, from what we know, there could be a lot more going on behind the scenes, and maybe that's the reason that he hasn't announced his upcoming project. But either way, I really do think that he should probably leave the label. I think it's basically done everything that it can for him. I'm not saying that he needs to walk away and disrespect it by any means. Simply just end the deal, do whatever you have to do to get get out of it, and then try to make it go as an independent artist or maybe sign to a bigger label. I really do believe that J.I.D has the potential to be on the level with people like Drake, Kendrick, and Cole himself, which might be a little bit crazy to say, but all he really needs is a little bit of a push, a little bit less of a shadow casted over him, and to be able to drop music when he wants to. And if he can do all that, in another 5 years, he might be one of the biggest rappers in the game. But for right now, that's only speculation, and all I can really say is, well, he made it a lot farther than he probably thought he was ever going to. It's crazy to think that at 20, he felt completely washed up, he was kicked out of college, no prospects, no job experience, to now one of the biggest artists on the Dreamville label, having big time collaborations with some of the biggest artists in the game, being heavily respected with a huge fan base. I mean, Jid made it, baby. What more is there to say? So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was a little bit of a longer one, and this usually isn't the type of artist that I cover, so if anything's a little bit off, I apologize for that, but hopefully it was at least entertaining. I'm hoping to keep popping these videos out more regularly after this point, but the thing is, they keep getting longer and longer and longer, and that's not even intentional. I just start writing the script, and then all of a sudden I got a 50-minute long video. But hey, if you guys watch all the way through, I'll keep putting them out. So with all that said, if you could be so inclined, subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 26k subscribers. Thank you guys so much for 25k. That's crazy. We're already a quarter to 100, so if we make it, that'd be insane. If not, well, it's been a crazy ride anyways. Shout out to Knife Gang. Leave a knife emoji in the comments below and let me know who you want to see next. I see those comments about Lil Candy Paint. I'm trying to work on that one. There's not a whole lot of information about the guy online, and his interviews are pretty bad, but hey, I'm working on it. But yeah, besides that, always remember to touch grass, drink milk, and never drop out of school unless you want to be a rapper. Then go ahead. Yeah, bye.